My first open-ended question is, what do people not know about you that they should know about?
Well, after 20 years on the bench and 3 times through the Judicial Nomination Evaluation Committee, I don't think there's too much. But I would say, if you saw me after hours, if you saw me on the weekends, I'm that person behind you in line in Target, and I'm wearing sweats and a baseball cap, and I'm having an argument with my daughter that she can't buy another bottle of nail polish. And by that I mean, really, I think this last year especially, I've had to narrow my focus as to what's really important to me, and it's work and family. So I've probably become the most uninteresting person you know. But all my spare time is spent, with my daughters and my husband, who during the first part of the week does yeoman's labor because he's with them Monday through about Thursday. I come back from San Francisco and then I take over from about Thursday till Monday morning till I go back to San Francisco. So I guess you should know I'm just completely all mom in my spare time.
Well, and that's one of the questions that's particularly important to me as a woman lawyer, the whole work-life balance dynamic. And someone as successful as you, and working that balancing act at such a high level, it's inspirational to me, and I was curious if you could talk, as your kids have aged, how you've gone through that process of balancing the family and work.
Thank you. Well, I know it's true for me and my husband, who, when I married him, started off, he was a police sergeant and then ultimately retired last year as a police lieutenant. And because we had our children later, when we were both close to our late 30s, and I had my last one when I was about 40, it was clear to me that we made choices about prioritizing that. So when the children were very young, and I was a Muni Superior Court judge, I took assignments that were probably the less glamorous ones, but that permitted me to flex my schedule and to torch the attorneys because I needed to get out to pick up my kids. So if you talk to any of the attorneys probably in the early 90s, they would say, if they had kids, they wanted to come to my court because I would be chop, chop, you gotta get out of here by 5, chop, chop. So it was a matter of picking assignments that fit really their growth. So by the time I went to the Court of Appeal, when they were about 6 and 8, I like to say, as I was saying at the table, at the Court of Appeal, you get to work any 16 hours of the day you want. So it permits the opportunity to attend the basketball tryout, go see the variety show, and drive the kids to the play. It just means you're up earlier in the morning reading, or you're late at night doing some reading. So it's about, and the same with my husband. He was on SWAT, he came off of that. He was on other things. Eventually he wrote a desk toward the end of his career because he would get calls from me and we would just sort of jockey our schedule as to what we could do between us to accommodate the kids.
So when you were a kid, did you want to be Chief Justice?
I will honestly tell you that up until July, I think it was 22nd, 2010, the idea of being Chief Justice never crossed my mind. Never. In fact, when Chief George announced his retirement, it was one of those moments like, you know where you were when you heard that John Lennon was shot? Oh, it just was one of those moments where I knew that it would change things considerably. We were in for great turmoil. And I told my husband, we are about to see great theater. Because I knew there would be jockeying, I know there were tremendous candidates who were qualified, and then the blogs and the newspaper articles started naming them, and I was on board following that, excited about the folks I knew, but never considering myself in that running until I received a call from the governor's office.
So now that you're here, 11 months in, right?
Yes.
How's it going?
It's been the most challenging professional year of my career as a lawyer, as a judge. And mind you, when I started out as a lawyer, I was an unlikely prosecutor because I came from a large family, traditional youngest child girl, never spoke up, never questioned authority, never interrupted anyone, never had the nerve to ask questions when I thought something was wrong. So, my first 6 months of being a DA was a little bit rocky. So thereafter I grew into it. But this year has been, I would say, not only the most challenging, but along the span of 20 years on the bench, dealing with the best attorneys and the worst attorneys, and dealing with crises that really manifested and those that didn't. This year, I think I've had to use every tool in my toolbox that I've acquired over my 20-plus years, 27 years of being in the law, either as an attorney or as a judge.
So when I was doing research for this, there are two things that people described you as. One, very diplomatic, and two, having a spine of steel, which seemed to be pretty contradictory. And I'm just curious how that plays into your job and your career as you've gotten here, to be able to be a force of diplomacy, but also make decisive moves and decisions when you need to be.
I think in terms of diplomacy, it's probably not unlike all of you in many respects. After having done years and years of negotiation between counsel and just living in a court with more than a second judge, we always had controversy. And I found out in time that the best way to deal with all the controversy was to remain calm and listen to the fact and be able to separate fact from opinion. And so maybe in describing diplomatic skills, I don't think it's unlike yours, is I really wait and listen for the facts. I realize there are many, many opinions, and opinions are subject to change. But what I like to know first are facts. And as you know, when you talk to your clients or when you're in front of a judge, I know you have an opinion. I know you think this certain way, but what I need first are the components of the facts. Then we'll go from there, but let's all be clear on what the ground facts are. And so I've always started there. And it was especially important this year coming into the branch, not only because of our budget concerns, but because there were governance issues. And a lot of the budget questions, the budget opinions, and the governance opinions were just that. They were based on opinions. And it wouldn't have been appropriate for me in my first year to make decisions based on opinions. I mean, we have 1,700 jurists. There were 1,700 opinions. So in terms of diplomacy, I think I look for the facts first, and I'm really clear that I want the facts first. And in terms of spine of steel, I think I read that as more like the ability to carry weight. That's what I think. Maybe that's part of what I think about spine of steel is garnering all the tools from the toolkit over 26 years of practice and profession. I think that I've learned how to triage crisis and know how to prioritize. But if, in fact, the facts are laid out in front of me, and I have a decision to make for the best interest of the public, the best interest of the branch, the best interest of this injured party in this case, once I get there, and I don't get there lightly, you really have to convince me strongly that I'm wrong on getting to that conclusion. And getting to that conclusion, I really try to take into people's account before I get to my own.
You mentioned the budget, and I know that's one of those elephant in the room issues. Can you talk a little bit about where we are and where we're going?
Yes, but let me first start with where we've been. This is the 4th consecutive year of budget cuts to the judicial branch. Comes as no surprise because that's the 4th parallel year of cuts and a bad budget in California. So there's no way around the fact that we are in our 4th year of cuts. And each year the cuts gotten deeper and deeper. But somehow each year, the branch, which is composed not only of the judges, but the lawyers who do business in the branch and the court staff that help us and make us move, we've been able to be innovative. We've been able to continue to do almost as much with the 4th year of cuts. So in terms of where we've been, when I go to the governor's office, they seem to think that we've been able to take a cut and we can take another one because we've been innovative, because we've been smart, because we've been efficient, because we're all working harder and longer. But this year, fiscal year 11-12, is different in my view, qualitatively and quantitatively. Qualitatively because we are on our 4th year of budget cut. We just can't keep cutting and cutting and cutting because there's no more left. And this year in 11-12, it's quantitatively different because if you look at our numbers and you just step back, the judicial branch was $1.1 billion in solution to the general fund. So I just like to think of this graphic. If you have a pie and you were looking at the state general fund and you saw that money went to corrections and money goes to education and money goes to social services, if you look at the judicial branch slice of the pie, it's 2.4% of the general fund. And really, it's only 1.4% because that's all that the general fund gives us out of taxes and revenue, 1.4%. The other 1% comes from the counties, from our historic funding from the counties back in the 90s. We call that our maintenance of effort. 1% comes from the counties to fund the judicial branch. So we use 1.4% to provide justice to 37 million people who live in California. And this year alone, we were cut $350 million from our budget. They borrowed $350 million from court construction, no interest. They also borrowed another $90 million, minimal interest. They also, at the last minute, swept $310 million from our construction fund projects, which means they didn't even borrow at that point. They just took it to the general fund. So when you add up those borrowings and that sweep, in addition to the $350 million cut, it adds up to $1.1 billion in fiscal year 11-12. So we rallied in fiscal year 11-12. We were able to kind of keep the seams of the outfit together. But 12-13 makes us vulnerable, and that kind of cut is unsustainable. So we need some of that back for 12-13.